Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My shift started like every other Tuesday night. Quiet, fluorescent, and predictably monotonous. I was halfway through my second bottle of convenience store coffee, the bitter stuff that stains your tongue for hours, when the call came through my facility earpiece. Level B vivarium needs spot mop cleanup. Biohazard Protocol 2. Don't forget your boot covers this time, Marcus. That was Rick, my supervisor, a guy who always sounded like he was chewing gravel. His voice had the unique gift of making everything sound like a punishment. I thumbed the push to talk on my shoulder and gave a deadpan reply. Copy, on my way. But I wasn't. Not really. You see, the rat vivarium in level B always made my skin crawl. Hundreds of cages stacked in neat grids, a faint chemical smell that lingered in your clothes, and the incessant echoing squeaks of lab rats under stress. It was where they tested all kinds of stuff: vaccines, neurological agents, bloodborne experiments. I never asked questions. I was a janitor, not a biochemist. And I wasn't in the mood to bleach a floor streaked with something red from a rat that probably had 2 livers. So I took a shortcut, one I knew I wasn't supposed to. The corridor outside the vivarium wing forked at a maintenance closet. One way took you to the elevators, the other through a badge-restricted tunnel labelled Authorised Research Staff Only Level 3 Clearance Required. It had been Rick himself who let slip months ago that the sensor on that door hadn't been properly reconfigured after the last software patch. The badge swipe wouldn't open it for long, but if you slid the card with just the right angle and timed it with the motion sensor, the locking mechanism glitched open for about 4 seconds. I'd used it twice before, never lingered, never got caught. But this time, something was off. When the door hissed open, the air on the other side felt colder than usual, not just in temperature, like it had been untouched for hours, maybe days. The corridor lights flickered in sterile blues and whites, a stark contrast to the soft amber LEDs of the public janitorial zones. To my left, reinforced glass panels that looked into what I assumed were holding cells or testing rooms. Most of them were dark, but a few had diagnostic monitors running low-res feeds of biometric vitals, heartbeat, oxygen saturation, intracranial pressure. One room had a person inside, sitting on a cot, head slumped forward, unmoving. I stopped. This wasn't the usual lab animal testing zone. This was something deeper, something classified. But I was already halfway down the corridor, and the mop cart I was pushing was a dead giveaway. I didn't want to backtrack through the vivarium, so I moved quickly, keeping my head low. When I reached the next set of doors, I swiped my badge again. Access denied. Clearance insufficient. I tried again, same result. Then something clicked behind me. The door I had come through sealed shut with a mechanical thunk. No hiss of air compression, just a hard lock, like the kind used in containment cells. Then the overhead lights turned red, initiating decontamination sequence. The robotic voice was calm, almost soothing, but the words made my blood run cold. I panicked, slammed my fist on the wall panel, tried the emergency release. Nothing responded. To exit the experimental pathogen wing, complete full decontamination protocol. Manual override is disabled during emergency power state. That was the next line. I remembered it word for word because it repeated itself twice. And then the power cut completely. Not a blackout, more like a brownout. Emergency lighting kicked on with battery-fed strips along the floor, casting the corridor in a sickly, dim orange glow. The air vents slowed to a crawl. I could hear my own breathing. There was no one coming. I was locked in a place I wasn't supposed to be, without access, without authority, and now without light. I tried my radio. Rick, come in. I need a manual override on E-Wing. Door locked me in. Bad badge red. Rick, you copy? Static. I changed frequencies, called security, Called facilities, nothing. Either the internal comms were down, or this part of the building had been isolated. Then something hit the glass in the room to my left, hard. I flinched and turned, dropping the mop. Inside, under the flickering emergency lights, the figure on the cot was no longer sitting. It was standing. It pressed both palms to the reinforced glass and stared at me. No, not stared. Faced me. Its eyes weren't tracking. They were glassy, empty. There was blood at the corners of its mouth, dried, cracked. It was a woman, maybe mid-30s, blonde hair shaved on one side. Her lab coat was unbuttoned, hanging loose like she didn't care, or didn't know. A hospital bracelet dangled from one wrist. Then she opened her mouth, or rather, her jaw dropped, too far. The sound she made wasn't human. It was guttural, wet, like vocal cords straining against something they weren't meant to shape. And then she began slamming herself into the glass, again and again. Her head snapped backward as she struck, leaving a growing red smear on the glass. Still, she didn't stop. I backed away. This wasn't right. This wasn't how containment zones were supposed to work. I'd been around high-grade medical quarantine units before. I knew what level 4 looked like. Sealed glass, airlocks, chemical foggers. But this place felt wrong, like someone had improvised it after the fact. I looked around. The hallway ended at a sealed door with a biometric scanner. To the side, a keycard reader, half covered by black tape. Above it, a handwritten sign on medical tape read, "Researcher access only, do not open unless escorted." But below that, someone had scribbled in marker, "She's still in here with them. God help us." I knew I needed to get out. I didn't care about protocol, didn't care about getting fired. If I could reach the exit stairwell at the far end of this corridor, maybe I could punch the mechanical lock or find an emergency ladder down to the loading docks. I turned around, and that's when I saw the other doors open. Down the hall, another chamber slid open silently, the interior dark as pitch. A silhouette stepped out. It wasn't walking right. Shuffling, jerking, like its joints weren't bending where they should. Then it saw me, and bolted. I didn't even think. I sprinted, abandoning the mop cart and skidding across the tile. The emergency lights gave me just enough warning as the thing slammed into the wall behind me, knocking over a diagnostic panel with a crash of shattered plastic. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear it. Bare feet slapping against the linoleum. Ragged breath like air torn through a wet towel. Something dragging as it moved. I hit the sealed door at the far end and slapped the panel with my open hand. Access denied. I hit it again, panic rising, when a woman stepped from the shadows and keyed in a long numeric override without saying a word. The door unsealed with a heavy clunk and hissed open. She barely glanced at me before turning down the next corridor. I was too shocked to argue. I followed. We moved fast, not full sprint, more like the terrified shuffle of people who were trying not to breathe too loud. She led me through a decontamination prep chamber, dark, unused, and into a long maintenance corridor that smelled like chemical dust and stale antiseptic. The emergency lighting in this section was dimmer, almost failing in places. Red battery indicators blinked slowly along the walls. Only after a full minute of running did I hear the next door seal shut behind us. She turned, finally slowing, and leaned her back against a rusting conduit cabinet. "Name?" she asked, still winded. "Marcus. Custodial services. Overnight shift. I just clean." She stared at me for a few seconds longer than I was comfortable with, like she was measuring something in my face. "Dr. Eliza Tran," she said finally. "Microbiology. I work in the B-Wing containment project. You shouldn't have been able to access that corridor." "I didn't access it," I said. "I cheated it. Maintenance trick. I was trying to avoid the rat lab." She didn't seem amused. "You picked the wrong damn shortcut. That wasn't part of the rat lab wing. That's experimental containment. We've been in partial lockdown for 72 hours. No one's supposed to be in that wing unless they're part of Protocol Theta. I don't even know what that is." "Exactly," she said grimly. She pushed off the wall and moved forward, motioning for me to follow. I noticed then that she walked with a slight limp, her right ankle taped and darkened with dried blood. She moved like she'd been favoring it for a day or more, but wasn't willing to stop. This way. If we stay in the main corridors, they'll find us. They're attracted to movement and light, not just sound. I followed in silence, trying to make sense of it all. Wuchang, the facility, officially known as the Southwest Biomedical Advancement Complex, was a sprawling maze of interconnected labs, storage bunkers, clean rooms, and restricted wings. Built in the early 2000s on the outskirts of Phoenix, it was originally part of a DARPA-funded biotechnical research initiative, later privatized and run under contract by Halcyon Molecular Systems, a defense-adjacent contractor with a reputation for working on unsanctioned research. I'd read the rumors, heard the whispers in the break room, chimera testing, neurovirus mapping, CRISPR-based immunological warfare, but most of us just chalked it up to corporate paranoia, the kind of nonsense you'd hear in Reddit threads. Now, it didn't feel like paranoia. We passed through a rusted mechanical subfloor with grated catwalks and emergency ladders. The air was heavy here, humid, metallic, like the inside of a failing HVAC unit. Every now and then, something below us in the lower service channels made a metallic clunk. I tried not to look down. Eventually, we reached a door marked Lab Echo 7, Bioshield Testing Wing. The lab was dark, the only illumination from a glowing green backup monitor on a wall-mounted touchscreen near the entrance. Dr. Tran entered a long access code and the door slid open on manual power. Inside, the room was a disaster. The lab tables had been overturned to create makeshift barricades. Medical trays, empty IV bags, and shattered reagent vials covered the floor. A bloody fingerprint trail curved along the left wall toward a sealed emergency wash station. The overhead lights were flickering on backup battery. "Close it behind you," she ordered. I did, manually engaging the internal seal. She leaned her pole, a rebar rod really, sharpened crudely at one end, against a metal file cabinet and moved to the computer station. "This used to be our staging area," she said, "before the breach." "What happened?" I asked. "I mean, what are they?" She sat heavily in a lab chair, wincing from her ankle, and finally looked me square in the eyes. "They're infected," she said. "Human trials were being done in secret. I wasn't supposed to know. A neurotropic viral payload, artificially accelerated, originally designed for battlefield application, induce paralysis, suppress fear, enhance aggression, not for soldiers, for weaponized vectors. The original theory was that it could create controllable biological agents, people too sick to resist commands, but still capable of physical movement. "You're saying you made zombies." "I'm saying someone else did," she said, "and they didn't tell the rest of us." She pointed to a small storage freezer in the corner, its front panel half shattered. "There was a subject in that cryo chamber, Patient 0 of Trial D. I only learned about it after one of the techs tried to smuggle out the tissue samples on a flash drive. He never made it past the biometric gates." "And now it's out?" I asked. She nodded. "Power cut before full containment could activate. No ventilation purge. Some of them broke quarantine and reached the lower vivarium levels. Then the animals started dying. Then the techs. By the time Central Security got the lockdown activated, everyone in experimental was already exposed. The upper floors were sealed off. Those of us stuck down here, we're just ghosts in the system now." I moved to the overturned supply rack near the back of the lab, scanning for anything useful. Found a flashlight with half charge, an old Motorola handheld radio, and a set of zip ties. I clipped the radio to my belt and gave the flashlight a test flick. It buzzed weakly, but held a beam. "What's the plan, Doc? We can't just sit here." "There's a freight lift down in the sub-basement," she said. "Old service unit from when this place was still federal. Leads to a second tunnel system, meant for discrete cargo movement between buildings. If we can get to that tunnel, we might reach the East Campus utility building. It has hardwired landlines." "Big if," I muttered. There's another problem, she added, voice lower. There's a research assistant still trapped down here, a kid named Joey Kessler. He locked himself inside one of the cryo labs during the first wave. I've been trying to reach him via the backup terminals, but he's not answering. I sighed. You want to go back toward the infected to save a lab tech? I'm not leaving him here to die. He knows the data protocols. He has clearance, I don't. If he's alive, he may be the only one who can access the core systems and initiate full lockdown. Without it, never be able to stop them from getting out once power comes back. Her words settled into the silence like a weight. The lab was quiet again, but the scratching in the vent had stopped. Either it moved on, or it was waiting. I wasn't sure which was worse. Eliza adjusted her grip on the rebar rod and used her shoulder to push open a side door leading into a narrow hallway, lined with chemical showers and sealed specimen hatches. The emergency lights continued their dim, blood-orange glow along the baseboards. You know where he is? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Cryolab 3C, bottom of sub-level 6. But if the service elevators are offline, we'll need to access the emergency shaft behind the old hydrogen storage corridor. The central stairwell's locked down, and most of the electronic panels are dead, unless the building resets into maintenance mode. Which takes how long? 48 hours. I swore under my breath and followed her deeper into the corridor. The further down we went, the worse the air became. Stale, metallic, and tinged with something acrid, like burned plastic mixed with bleach. Every few feet, we passed flickering LCD panels stuck on standby mode. Some displayed garbled schematics of various containment wings. One showed an animated map with blinking red dots moving slowly through a quadrant marked E-wing quarantine. None of it looked good. Did anyone else make it out? I asked after several minutes of silent walking. I know at least 4 researchers evacuated through the decon tram system before lockdown, but everyone in the Theta Wing and Vivarium levels were trapped when the bio-containment alarm tripped. A few of us took shelter in labs like Echo 7, but I've lost radio contact with most of them since the generators failed. We reached a heavy steel door, labelled Hazardous Material Containment Access H2 Vault. Eliza pulled out a security fob from her pocket, clicked it against a reset reader, and waited. A second later, the panel clicked and the door slowly opened on old hydraulic hinges. The shaft beyond was pitch black. I hope you're not afraid of ladders, she muttered, pulling a glow stick from her coat and cracking it. She dropped it down the shaft. It bounced once, twice, then disappeared into the dark. 6 floors down, manual descent. There was a fixed ladder bolted to the left wall and a secondary cable chute to the right. I looked down into the abyss and felt my gut turn. You sure this is the best way? No, she said, but it's the only way. The climb down was slow and miserable. My arms burned after the first 2 levels, and the metal rungs were slick with condensation. Somewhere below us, a distant echo of movement made me freeze, metal creaking followed by a soft impact, like something large dropping onto steel. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We just kept going, one rung at a time. By the time we reached the bottom, my shirt was soaked through and my hands ached. I dropped the last few feet and landed on the grated floor of sub-level 6. Eliza followed with a grimace, clutching her ankle as she touched down. This way, she whispered, gesturing down the hallway. We moved quickly through the maintenance corridor, passing shuttered doors and warning signs. The signage shifted from standard lab labeling to much colder language: genetic isolate storage, neural vector, containment, blood work compartment, B. Whatever they were working on down here, it hadn't been cleared through any oversight committee. Then we came to a sealed door, half covered in a scorched plastic sheet. The security display above it was dark, but someone had jammed a metal tray into the mechanism to keep it slightly ajar. On the glass panel next to the door, a smeared message was written in red dry erase marker. Do not enter containment breached. Eliza didn't hesitate. She pulled the tray aside, forced the door open just enough to slide through, and looked back. Keep quiet, move fast. Inside, Cryolab 3C looked like a frozen tomb. The temperature dropped immediately. My breath fogged in front of me. The overhead lights were out, but long freezer panels along the walls still glowed faint blue, running on residual power. Rows of upright cryopreservation pods lined the left side of the room, each with biometric tags and scan displays. Most blinking red. Only one showed a steady green heartbeat line. "There," Eliza said, pointing. At the far end of the room, inside a small security vestibule, a young man huddled against the wall, wrapped in an emergency blanket. He looked up with a start when we entered, holding a broken lab tablet like it could protect him. "Eliza," he said, blinking in disbelief. She nodded, rushing to him. "Joey, you're alive. Thank God." He stood slowly, legs shaky. "I've been here since Friday. When the power went out, I couldn't get the emergency lock disengaged. I tried everything. I didn't think anyone was still out there." "We don't have long," she said. "We need your access to the core system. Can you reach the secondary console?" "I can try, but most of the backups are offline. There might still be a route through the BSL-4 observation network. If I can log into the mainframe from the monitoring suite, I can trigger a compartmental lockdown." "Do it," I said, glancing at the entry door. "Whatever gets this place sealed." He nodded and moved to the far corner terminal, booting it up from local standby. A moment later, the monitor flickered on, showing a multi-screen display of security feeds. Many were black, but a few still showed low frame rate footage from sealed rooms and corridors. Then he clicked to a labeled view, Containment Hall, Sublevel 5. My blood ran cold. It showed a corridor flooded with red emergency lights and a group of infected standing motionless. At least 20 of them. They weren't pacing, they weren't moving. They were just standing there in perfect stillness, heads slightly tilted, all facing the same direction, toward a wall panel where a fan vent spun slowly. Then, as the camera cycled its feed, something in the group moved, not twitched, not jerked, turned. Its head rolled with eerie precision toward the camera lens. It didn't have eyes, not really, just sunken sockets, grey and glistening, but it stared with an awareness that made my skin crawl. "I think they're learning," Joey whispered. Eliza didn't answer. She was staring at another feed now, one showing the freight lift at the far end of the facility. The doors were open, and something had taken the elevator up. "We need to move," she said. "Now." Joey backed away from the monitor and pulled a backup drive from the console. "I got the logs. If I can get to the comms tower in East Wing, I can send a partial dump to the CDC satellite node. That'll trigger an external alert." "Assuming anyone's left to receive it," I muttered. We exited the cryo lab the way we came, faster this time. I could feel the urgency building in Eliza's movements, more limping, less caution. We made it back into the corridor, but something had changed. The air felt different. Still, yes, but charged. Like the quiet you feel just before a summer monsoon breaks. The battery strips on the walls were completely dead now, leaving only the faint light from Joey's tablet and my flashlight to cut through the darkness. The dim blue glow of the cryolab had vanished behind us like a door closing on the last safe place in the world. Joey was breathing hard, trying to keep pace with us without making noise. Every few seconds he looked back over his shoulder. I didn't blame him. Something about that still image on the monitor, those infected standing together, facing the vent like they were waiting for instructions, had burned itself into my memory. They weren't just moving toward noise or light, they were organized, or worse, becoming organized. "Backtrack to the freight corridor," Eliza whispered. "If the elevator was triggered, the sub-basement might still be pressurized. That lift shaft could lead us to the East Wing transit system." "And the hazmat guy?" I asked under my breath. "He didn't look like security." "He wasn't," she said. "Security isn't authorized to use suppressed weapons inside the BSL level sectors. Too many liability issues. If Halcyon's sending armed cleanup crews, we've moved past containment. We're into erasure." We rounded the corner, past the old hydrogen storage chamber. and immediately stopped. At the far end of the hallway, where the lift corridor began, a heavy black transport case sat open in the middle of the floor. Next to it, two hazmat-clad operators lay slumped against the wall, unmoving. The first had his face shield shattered from inside. The other's neck had been broken cleanly, the angle of his helmet visor twisted against his collarbone. Eliza moved slowly, checking the corners. I knelt by the nearest body. The guy had been wearing a tactical harness with a Halcyon serial tag, HMX-09. The MPX was missing, but he still had a sidearm holstered. A suppressed Glock 19 with a mounted TLR-8 light. I took it without hesitation, racked the slide to confirm a round in the chamber, and slipped the extra mag from his chest rig into my pocket. Nearby was a bio case, its contents removed. The rest of the team wasn't visible. Whatever took them out didn't use brute force, Joey said quietly. This is clean. Precise. They weren't killed by the infected, Eliza added. This looks like internal conflict. Could have been a rogue team member, or... She didn't finish. I didn't press her. We had to move. The lift shaft was open, not destroyed, just frozen mid-operation. Someone had jammed a crowbar into the control relay box, forcing the doors apart. The car was gone, having risen to an upper floor. Below, the shaft descended into total darkness. Joey knelt at the wall-mounted panel and started wiring a handheld controller into the control bus. If I can pulse the system's call function, I might be able to return the car. It'll drop back here unless it's been manually overridden. You've got 60 seconds, Eliza said, glancing behind us. While he worked, I moved to the edge of the shaft and peered down. The walls were lined with old conduit ladders and service tubes. No movement. But then something tickled the edge of my hearing. A faint clang from somewhere below. Slow. Rhythmic. Not footsteps. Climbing. Eliza, I started, just as Joey hit a key. The lift's hydraulics groaned overhead. A second later, the floor panels began to rattle as the car descended. But just before it reached our level, I saw a flash of movement down the shaft. Something crawling fast. The car settled into place with a thunk and the doors split open. Go! Eliza shouted. We piled in, Joey still clutching his tablet. Eliza smashed the button for sub-level 2, then wedged the rebar rod into the emergency stop slot to lock the door. The car began to rise. Not 10 seconds later, the shaft exploded with sound. Something slammed into the underside of the car, hard enough to rattle the floor. A pair of clawed, blood-covered fingers slid between the lower door seals and scraped uselessly against the inside lip. A face followed, bloated, lidless with fractured teeth and a neck twisted too far sideways. It screamed against the steel as the car continued to ascend, vanishing below us into the pit. We rode in silence the rest of the way. Sub-level 2 was colder, quieter, and strangely intact. The lights were still functioning, though dimmed, and the air filtration system was humming faintly. We stepped out into a corridor lined with concrete shielding and reinforced blast doors. This was infrastructure level, mostly mechanical routing, server nodes, and the transition point for the East Wing tram tunnel. Eliza checked the signage, then motioned left. Server alley leads to the communications hub. Emergency uplink node is at the end. I thought the external comms were cut, I said. They are, but if Joey's code dump made it through the subgrid, the tower might handshake with the CDC's outpost repeater in Flagstaff. It's off-book, but still operational. Halcyon never got full clearance to isolate it. We moved quickly. The East Tram Line had been part of the original DARPA design, an underground maglev corridor linking the 3 main biolabs and the old logistics warehouse across the highway. No public maps showed it. The only access points were through authorized transport gates inside the lower utility wings. Everything down here was bare concrete, steel conduit, and emergency signage. Halfway through the corridor, Joey stopped suddenly and raised his hand. "What is it?" I asked. "Motion," he said, pointing to the floor. A fine layer of settled dust had been disturbed. Not footprints, drag marks uneven, deep, and erratic. Something large had been pulled through here recently, or had pulled itself. A smear of dried blood crossed the wall in a long, arcing streak. "No way that's infected," I muttered. "They don't move that slow." "It might not be infected," Eliza said. I looked at her. "What then?" She didn't answer. The comms room was sealed, a mag-locked steel door controlled by biometric input. Eliza reached into her coat and produced a small chip reader, a secondary access module, and clipped it into the door's auxiliary port. Joey stood behind her, ready with the external data pack. As she keyed in the override, I turned to watch the hallway behind us. That's when I saw the shadows move. Not shapes, bodies. 4 of them, staggering forward from the dark, skin pale and bloodless. But they weren't moaning. They weren't charging. They were quiet, measured. Then one of them raised something. A suppressed weapon. "Down!" I yelled, pushing Joey aside. The air cracked with 2 muted bursts. One round embedded in the doorframe. The other tore through Eliza's side. She dropped instantly, clutching her abdomen, blood soaking through her lab coat. I fired back without thinking. The Glock bucked in my hand as I sent 2 rounds toward the attackers. One hit center mass. The figure stumbled but didn't fall. They retreated, melting back into the dark like shadows dispersing. "Not infected," I muttered. "They're halcyon." "Cleaners," Eliza gasped, still conscious. "They're not here to stop the spread. They're here to erase it." Joey pulled her back against the wall while I slammed my fist into the access panel. The door clicked open. We dragged her inside. The communications hub was smaller than I expected. Just a single room lined with rack mount servers, cooling vents, and a single satellite uplink terminal. Joey dropped to the console and began typing furiously. Eliza lay back against the server bank, face pale but still alert. "Status?" I asked. "Establishing handshake." "Come on." "Yes, I've got local node sync. Uplinks dirty but alive. Compressing logs. Routing to CDC repeater via encrypted burst packet." A minute passed, intense silence. Then Joey looked up. "Transmission sent. Handshake confirmed. Flagstaff received the package." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we just alerted the world that Halcyon buried a synthetic neurovirus inside a public-facing research facility, lost control of it, and tried to cover it up with bullets and bleach." "Good," I said. "Now let's get out of here." But before we could move, the terminal beeped. New inbound message. "Emergency containment enacted." Joey stared at the screen. "What? That's not from Flagstaff." A second beep followed, then a third. All local, then the room lights flickered. A monotone voice began to speak over the facility intercom. "Initiating burn protocol. All sector doors locking. Ventilation purge in 6 minutes." "No," Eliza whispered. "They're going to torch the lower facility." "They got the alert," Joey said bitterly. "And now they're making sure no one ever knows." I looked at Eliza, her face pale, blood soaking her side. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "You don't have a choice," she replied, forcing the backup drive into my hand. "That door behind the relay rack, it's an old service tunnel. Comes out near the overflow storm drains east of the foundation. Go, tell them what happened here." Joey moved to help her up, but she grabbed his wrist. "Marcus is faster. He runs. You stay. You've seen the logs. If anyone makes it, one of you has to get it out." I hesitated. Then she shouted, "Go!" I turned and bolted through the back door, flashlight flickering as I ran into the black concrete tunnel. Behind me, the blast doors slammed shut, and the purge countdown began. I don't know how long I ran. I don't remember when the explosion started. The tunnel eventually gave way to rusted drainage pipes, then to a sloped ladder that opened beneath the foundation of a crumbling perimeter wall. By the time I crawled into the Arizona dawn, the desert sky was lit with smoke. Sirens wailed far off down the valley. Black SUVs tore down a dirt access road behind me. Too late. They buried the facility within hours. The media said it was a gas explosion, subterranean fault lines. negligent storage of hydrogen tanks, no mention of a virus, no mention of a lab tech named Joey or a doctor named Eliza Tran. But I still have the drive, and the world will know what happened, because they forgot one thing. I'm just a janitor, and no one notices the janitor until it's too late. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.